when you say, "Oh, I show you this cool demo," and people go, "Oh, that's amazing, let's do it," but they haven't really thought about the people side. Yeah, tech is great, but at the end of the day, there's people and process. Sort of went down this path of instructional design, developing corporate programs. Then you work with a smaller business where you have a founder and they can make a quick decision, but then they have a lot of challenges as well on that scale. Eventually, I ended up in this world of marketing tech, and I think that's the nature of the industry that I really love. Is it's a very
Welcome to the DevReady podcast. Joining me on the DevReady podcast today, I have Sean Campbell. Sean, thanks for taking the time out of your day to have a chat.
Thank you, Anthony. Pleasure.
For those of you that are new here, I don't know how I run the podcast. I haven't actually met Sean. I don't know much about him. So, Sean, I'll let you take it away and let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Yes. So I'm your cousin. You didn't realize, like somehow.
It's a big family.
No, exactly right. No, actually, we met through an acquaintance, and he said it would be good for us to talk. And I thought, yeah, it's sometimes these unplanned conversations discover things that can help each other. So wherever we can add value to each other, that's where we start.
And that's the point of the podcast is to share information and network and meet great people. And then hopefully you can get a broader audience and meet some other people as well. So what do you currently do in your role and how did you get to where you are?
Yeah, so as you can tell from my accent, I'm not Australian, but I am based in Melbourne, as you are, I understand. I've been here since 2016, moved here because of different jobs that have popped up. And basically, I started off in IT, let's say back in 1997 in the US. So my first real kind of corporate job was working for this company that was a salvage pool operator. So you think a very traditional business that has sort of a cycle of tasks that have to be done. They're processing titles for vehicles. And you're thinking, oh, it's very, it's like a junkyard, right? It's nothing that's very technical in nature. But in fact, they became one of the largest, if not the largest, seller of online vehicles. So they're not very well known, but the stock had exploded. It was an amazing company to be with. So I was there at the very beginning of sort of that journey where they were acquiring these kind of mom and pop salvage pools around the country. And I was offered the opportunity to come on as a corporate trainer. So I was like, okay, what is this all about? Oh, great. There's these green machines called AS400 for the techies listening to the call, if they remember what that was, the green screen terminals. But anyway, I started off as a corporate trainer, and I was traveling around the U.S., like literally living in hotels and, having these great adventures, learning to drive forklifts and like speaking with these very small mom and pop businesses and trying to get them on a sort of a standardized system. So that was my first kind of entry into, how do you get people that are non-technical in nature? How do you get people that maybe are a little bit fearful of what technology is going to do to them and their roles? And how do you start to convince them that, there is a better way, it's more efficient, and this is going to help you in the long run? And that sort of like made me realize that when I was younger, when this is like late 90s, not everyone has PCs at that time. Businesses started to buy these things. My dad had an auto repair business. And he was somebody who is non-technical, a tradesman. He worked as an owner operator, so he didn't really work on the business as much as he started a business because he wanted sort of that freedom, but he didn't really. I guess maybe he had some of the skills of like the technician, but not really of the business person. So like when I was younger, I was coming out of Pepperdine and I had studied an undergrad in business. And, in my younger years, I'd sort of jumped into the family business and quickly realized that the trades, while I respect them hugely, it is very hard work. And I was like, I probably don't want to be doing that my entire career. So with the freedom to kind of do what I wanted to do, kind of went into other directions. But yeah, I spent most of my younger career going through the IT industry, first starting off with sort of internal sort of IT teams, integration manager and like bringing on new facilities onto the system, became a corporate trainer, sort of went down this path of instructional design, developing corporate programs, to bring everybody either not just on the tech, but just standard ways of working. Yeah, a lot of adventures, and I ended up actually living in Thailand for a bit, going back to the US, popping from LA, San Francisco, New York, and, enjoying my kind of youth. And then ended up during the dot-com boom to go through that adventure where it was like, incredible things happening in San Francisco, 2 years later, you're like, I have no job and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with myself, and then nobody's hiring, which is happening to a lot of people now. And just a lot of things continued to happen after that. And eventually I ended up in this world of marketing tech. So for those who don't know the lingo, MarTech, it's marketing technology. So you think about the early days of, Salesforce as a CRM. You think about this company I used to work for many years ago called Aprimo, which I actually work with a partner now who's an Aprimo partner. And they do a lot of digital asset management, and they do operational kind of marketing resource management. And I was able to travel around and work with companies like Ericsson and Prudential and these very large corporates, even spent some time in Sweden overseas, and had this opportunity at one point to move out to Asia, which I did, and spent 8 years in Thailand before moving to Australia. And then I've been here since, 2016. So it's been a combination of PM work, technical training, instructional design, and now I head a business consulting team for a MarTech provider while also doing some things on my own to build my own business. So a lot of adventures and countries and, and roles.
There's a lot of variety there.
Yeah, and I think that's the nature of the industry that I really love is it's a very project based sort of industry. Sometimes if you're on the sales side, which I have been as pre-sales, having spent time at Salesforce and whatnot, those deals take forever to sell. Then you work with a smaller business where you have a founder and they can make a quick decision, but then they have a lot of challenges as well on that side of that bit of on that scale, let's say. So I sort of like day job work a little bit more with the enterprise side, mid market. On the nighttime weekend job, I sort of work on the smaller advising, where how people can get started with AI.
So that would definitely keep you busy, because just keeping up with MarTech and the changes with AIs bringing into those platforms is probably hard enough, let alone trying to figure out how to keep up with everything else AI in the world.
Oh, exactly. I mean, a lot of the larger companies I find, and maybe you can chime in here as well, is that, they don't trust it as much as probably, they would like to take advantage of it. But there's that trust factor, and it's that, privacy and the data and the security and lots of questions that have to be vetted through. And then if you start to think about a lot of the large vendors like Salesforce or Adobe, they're embedding AI into their tools anyway. And so as they already have those sort of established relationships within these very complex organizations, they sort of have a leg up because they're in the politics of those companies. And so I say that the SaaS apocalypse is probably a little overstated at this point. Maybe on the smaller end of town, there are people that will say, well, I can't hire a developer. I can easily go to this tool and, spin up something and it'll do some coding for me, which granted, I've done that myself, because I don't develop myself. And I think it's all beneficial to everyone, I think.
Yeah, it's accelerating and enabling more people to do things. Little quick internal tools. You get the idea, you can just build something and you can do it. I've built 20 different translators and data processing things in the past couple of weeks just because project comes in. It's quicker just to ask it to do something and get that built than going to spend time researching and finding a tool and paying for it or whatever it may be.
But there's a big difference, right, between prototyping and production. I would say
Oh, definitely.
today there's tons of tools and you can jump on and say, I want this little agent to do something, and it does it, and it really gives you some benefit. And I think that gets people excited, and I think that's a good thing. I think people need to understand the technology and not be fearful of it. I think once you start getting into larger companies and they start thinking about how do I move from these like kind of experiments into something that is more production ready, has taken all the risk and compliance into account, that's a longer kind of thing that you have to look at. And I think they would be less eager to kind of gamble on sort of unknown vendors, whereas like the bigger vendors may already have sort of that advantage where they have all the infrastructure, they've got the relationships, the local housing and all.
They've got a bit of a reputation, but then they also do have a cost as well. Like just from experience, you look at HubSpot, all right, you can start at $17 a month for one of the 15 modules, then it goes up to like $700, then it's thousands a month for that same module. So it becomes prohibitive. But I think, yeah, what you mentioned there, the prototype to production, unless you've got the developers in-house or can work with them, it's going to be a prototype and it's never going to be like ready and stable because you haven't got the foundations built in that a team would have when they're building software themselves anyway.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for a lot of companies is they just either, unless they come from a tech background or they've come from sort of a operational, process-minded sort of paradigm, people will think like when you say, "Oh, I show you this cool demo," and people go, "Oh, that's amazing, let's do it," and then but they haven't really thought about the people side. So I always tell people like, yeah, tech is great, and I love tech. I've been in tech my entire career mostly. But at the end of the day, there's people and process. And I think that's where that whole training sort of background comes into play, where I start to think, okay, well, that's fine. But what about the change that's involved in having to get people to actually start using this thing? It may be the best invention since sliced bread, but if people don't, they're fearful of taking a bite, you can't, you have to get over that fear factor and that, the change management side and look at the process, right? So unless you've looked at the process up front, I don't understand how you can write specs or, instructions to a developer to actually develop something that'll be useful in the long run and not just an experiment.
And you can't. It's the same thing when you go to ChatGPT and you prompt, unless you give enough information, it's going to guess what the gaps are and just do what it thinks. A developer may do that as well. That's why you don't go straight to developers either most of the time, because they just build what they get in their mind and they might not be checking. You need to be able to plan and design what you're looking for, what's going to actually assist and provide value. Otherwise, there's no point doing it. I was going to say, yeah, your training background is probably very critical in these sort of any rollout, because change management, even if you've got one person, if you're, say, a small team of 2 people, trying to get that other person to change process is just as hard as trying to change a whole team at times.
Well, it's always the whiffum, right? What's in it for me?
Yep.
People want to know what's the benefit. And I've been spending a lot of time with mentoring and coaching some junior folks that, I tell them that communication skills, empathy, all of those things that AI is not great with. Like, I can't say if it'll be great with a robot later, but right now, I think people have to remember that, building those human connections, like reaching out to people, networking, having those like heart-to-heart conversations, getting to know people as people, I think is not going to be replaced anytime soon by AI. You still need the skills of communication to speak to a developer or to give instructions to an AI, because you have to be able to be concise, you have to be able to have good context. So, if you just tell an AI random, kind of stream of consciousness, it's pretty good with summarizing that stuff. But, you still need that human sort of connection somewhere in the loop, I would say.
Oh, definitely, because at the end of the day, it's a person using the system and you're dealing with people when you're trying to deploy it and change the way they do things. People don't like change. As soon as you start forcing something new upon them, it's a problem. You hear how many nightmare stories online about new SaaS platforms or CRMs that are getting deployed and then they never end up working because they didn't factor in change management or didn't speak to the right people, spoke to the managers and not the people actually doing the work or a few steps removed.
I mean, we've been looking with a partner I have, we've been looking at the whole strategy planning process, right? And saying, okay, typically companies will come together, whether they're big or small, they'll have some planning session or maybe they'll have an offsite and they'll get together and they'll start thinking through, what's going on in the market, what are the signals out there, what's probably noise we can kind of ignore and how do we get our plan together, right? And going through that process, what does it look like, before you start actually putting AI into it? So I think there's benefits to use AI to kind of speed up that process. But at the end of the day, there's the human judgment, right? You've got to have people that have a little bit of wisdom, experience, and perspective that understand the context. That's not just going to be a straight rip and replace, human and stick in robot. I think people are going to start to see where like those repetitive things that you can kind of make, deterministic, right? Like ones and zeros, it's either yes or no. Those things can be automated quite quickly. The things where it's a bit of gray area, you can get pretty good with those over time as you train the AI and it sees more conversations or sees more context over and over and over. but you still, I think, need that human at the end, because what is the consequence if it goes wrong? Well, in highly regulated industries, it could be an extremely bad outcome if it does something wrong.
There has to be someone liable at the end of the day, someone to blame.
Well, that's it. Right. When somebody comes and says, whose fault is it that this thing happened? They're going to point at Anthony, or going to point at the robot? Like,
Yeah, of course. And I think probably with a bit of that background you have from the US and what we see from the US here, it's very litigious. So there's always that fear of something can happen. I don't think that's as high on people's radar in Australia.
really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something there that is, you need someone to be liable. That's what these contracts are for. They're providing liability. They're telling you what the stakes and the scope is. So there's limitations to what you can complain against and what you're going to get delivered. And if you are just saying, all right, ChatGPT on this date and time did this for me, you've signed the agreement already that waives OpenAI's rights to do anything against them anyway.
Yeah, I mean, my concern with the big sort of, I'll call them the generic AIs, is that they've been scrubbing the internet. And the internet, as we know, is not all positive and wonderful news and stuff. It scrubs a lot of garbage. And then you start to rely your business on sort of like the median of the general information out in the world, right? Like, so if I want to be average, let me go and ask that knowledge of average stuff, like what I should be.
Yeah, it's going to be the most common answer or the most predictable is this is it. That's what you get.
Well, that's it, right? And I think people are starting to realize that, the best information are usually in back rooms. They're usually in, communities that are behind paywalls. They're usually, conversations that are not put on the internet, everything. So that's kind of what I've been working on, is basically having an AI that is grounded in certain information that is not publicly available, and provides those, especially smaller businesses, that opportunity for, having those perspectives of, an executive team. So if you're a small business and you can't afford to have the payroll of $5 million of salaries, you can still have access to those perspectives by going through the AI that would be providing. And then if you had to go to the internet because you're like, oh, I want to go search something, well, then you go and do it for that particular purpose. But you're not polluting sort of the pool of knowledge and watering it down with stuff that you would find that, if you go to the web and you ask, how do I start a business? You're going to get get a business license, make sure you get a bank account. Like, those are probably not going to guarantee your success. And if you look at the number of businesses out there, I think it's like, 36 million businesses in the US, and it's like a 90% failure rate. And so, the fact that you have grown your business, employees growing and all of that, that's, amazing that you've been able to go through that journey, because most people don't make it.
Yeah, it's very hard. There's always a constant learning, and you're battling to just move forward. But it is something that you need to understand. Like you said, there is knowledge that's not. The AI may know it, because a lot of it is general and a lot of it's open. But there's conversations that are had that it isn't aware about. But then you may not know how to prompt it to get that other information that's not in the median, like you mentioned, which is, I think, what most people's problem is.
You need that communication skill, right? You need that knowledge.
That's sort of like when Google first became a thing, you had to be good at Googling to get the results. Then Google improved and was giving you better results. The AI is doing that now, I think. So you don't need to know how to prompt as much, because the prompting and the reasoning they've put into these models is getting better. I very terse prompts. I don't write essays. I don't even write in proper English. I talk like I'm talking to a robot. And I get decent results out of what I'm doing, but that's the not having to prompt and put an essay in, but knowing the right things to give it to get the result you want, to guide it where you need it to go. That's the difference.
Now, I always think about this when I'm using AI. I always think I always have to remind myself, okay, whatever comes out of it, treat it almost like it sort of like knows you a little bit, potentially, if you've done the grounding, you've put all your information in, which that's one thing. Do you really want to do that in generic, sort of the big models, if you trust them? But think about, I still have to have that human judgment on whatever the output is that comes out, because I think by nature, it's, a lot of them are written to agree with you. They're not written to challenge you. And then when you get the answer that you're like, oh yeah, that's what I thought, then you're like, oh, I'm going to go do that. And then maybe you're basing your entire strategy on basically confirmation bias, right? Like, oh, well, it told me what I thought, and I must be good, so I'm going to go do that. So I think people have to remember, like, you need to be tested and you need to be challenged in whatever it is that you're putting in by default, I think, in a sense, to make you think about those sort of blind spots you have. Whether you're an owner or you're a manager or whatever, or you're just thinking about a big decision, you sort of need someone to give you that perspective and not just like, yeah, great idea. Like, I remember like, I don't know how the latest ChatGPT is, but like there's previous models that are very, very agreeable to you.
It still happens, but yeah, you can prompt it not to be, and that's probably what you need to do. Otherwise, you're falling into sort of the same trap as like the social media algorithms. As soon as you start seeing or liking any piece of content, you just keep getting that. So you're stuck in that bubble.
Well, I think, yeah, and to I think about this a lot because I look through my LinkedIn and it's like 90% AI stuff, and I go, oh my God, I'm so far behind. Everybody knows everything, and then I like go into the IRL, real world, and I talk to people and they're like, what is this ChatGPT thing? What does it do? Like what?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that still don't use it or don't know what you can do with it. But again, on LinkedIn, a lot of those people that you're seeing is, here's the one AI agent that will replace your business. Here's an NAN automation. They're all doing the same thing. There's nothing like substantive or really adding value. It's just leave a comment and I'll give you this playbook to do this workflow or whatever it may be.
I think what people miss is that they don't want to say the truth. It's like, hey, here's this great AI I have, but it's going to take some work. Like you're going to have to sit down, you're going to have to map your process out, you're going to have to talk to all the stakeholders involved. Doesn't matter if it's one co-founder or if it's like an entire organization of 300 people, but like you're going to have to do a little bit of work. It's not as simple as like just buy and my business is going to 10x itself tomorrow because I bought this technology. And that goes back to like decades of different, technology advancements where people say, oh my God, it's shiny. And then all the VC money rushes to it and they just pump it, hype it, hype it, hype it, hype it. They bail out. People lose their houses and investments and stuff. And eventually the technology sort of goes to that trough of disillusionment and then comes up and it actually provides a lot of benefits. If you think about the first, when, the commercial web came out, and there was all this hype around companies. I mean, I worked for a company that had a $400 million investment from a consortia of like, I think it was like Compaq and Dell, and like, it was a massive company, right?
Yep.
And, I was there for 2 years and we went from, at the time, I want to say it was like 1,200 to 2,000 people in that range, something like that. Offices in like the Embarcadero in San Francisco and Palo Alto and like, back in Pennsylvania, they had a nice office there. And it went from like that size in about 2 years. And I was like one of the last 2 or 3 people in the West Coast, I think, they bled all the money, but they were doing stupid things, right? They were like literally, we had like these things called stretch bonuses where, my friend and we both won, like I won it for 1 month and he won it for the next month. So we combined our resources and we went on this amazing trip to go scuba diving and rented a Porsche in Miami and like, did all this crazy stuff because they're like, yeah, you won this $10,000 trip and you have to take it by going to a private island or something stupid. I say it was stupid. I am very grateful for the experience.
That was fun and enjoyable time for you, yes.
But like if you're running a business, is that the smartest thing to do? Probably not. So it was really an amazing experience at the time. And I see a lot of that sort of hype now and crazy salaries. And I just wonder.
It's definitely there. When you hear $1 million salary for an AI scientist going to Meta, it's unbelievable, but they've got billions of dollars sitting in the bank and they can use it to do that. Look, at Meta's level or Google or even OpenAI, it's not their money, but those other two, that's their own money. Like they can afford to make misses and spend money.
Well, that's
where
it.
OpenAI and Anthropic are trying to raise money and constantly trying to become cash flow positive. I saw something the other day that was saying so Anthropic I think has more revenue than OpenAI, but they would both be profitable if you didn't take into account the training of the models. Which doesn't make sense because that's that's 90% of the business is training the models.
But do you think that from your perspective and your experience that eventually you kind of have this, the high end models that like people are going to compete and just keep building data centers to get more compute. And, and then you'll have a level of sort of sameness across where it's like foundational. Like everybody has a website and they say like everybody has an AI and it's at this level.
We're probably already there with AI, like as a LLM. Like, do most people notice the difference between ChatGPT 4, 4.5, 5.2, 5.3, whatever, 5.5? Like, do you know the actual differences when you're using them, or you're just seeing like a benchmark saying it's now 3% higher on the SWE benchmark scores?
And then what does that do for you as a business? You're like, am I going to literally have to deal with these releases every 2 weeks to a month and then like reconnect something to my AI employee? And then I'm going to have to train everybody and communicate internally that this thing's changed. Like that's not sustainable. I think you have to train the innovation mindset. Like people have to be like open to seeing the change and being able to constantly see what's down the horizon. But I don't see how businesses can react like constant change. I think they're going to have to be like, yes, have sort of like an eye on it, but I don't think you're going to rip out your tech stack every 2 weeks. I just don't see that happening.
No, and the problem is, from experience in building our own DevReady AI platform, as the models come out, is you need to test everything again, because you might not have to change initially you don't change your prompts or your platform, and the new model's released. You do need to test it and see what output is it giving. It's going to give you if you've told it to do, you must return me these 3 values, it's going to return you those 3 values, but the quality of them is going to be wildly different.
Yes.
And the potential interpretation of your prompt. So you do have to change that part, but you shouldn't have to change the rest of your system. But there is some sort of maintenance there, especially if you're running and building software.
So you work from, across different size of businesses that you kind of eyes on with AI. What has been the sort of, from your perspective, I'm interested around the build versus buy, should they buy something, or should they invest in actually becoming?
It's probably broken up more into 2 different bits. There's businesses that need the software to operate, and it becomes a core part of how they operate and their secret sauce. And those ones generally are building their own software, not buying off the shelf, because from experience, off the shelf is great until you have to start customizing it or changing it to your workflow. It doesn't generally work that well when you do match that, and then you have to start customizing it. And now you've got that company supporting custom code. If they do that as well, they may not even offer that, or you're changing your ways to work in the way their system works. And now you're the same as everyone else who's providing that service because you're using the same software. If you've got a unique way of working, and everyone thinks they do, but if that works for your business and it's operating, then off the shelf, say 50% of cases, will force you to change what you're doing. And then when the systems are user configurable and you can go in and change the workflows, it's very difficult to maintain that and keep that going. So I'll use Jira as an example. Atlassian's Jira is a software development, like task tracking tool, but you can use it for a marketing process. You can use it for a sales. You can use it for a support desk. You can design what the tasks look like, what the boards in the Kanban board, what the columns are, what filters you have, what workflows there are, what gates and acceptance checks there are. But to do that is a difficult task. And if you're a business running, then you're not going to sit there and configure it. And then if something changes, you're now beholden to whatever they change.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge is if you do decide to build, then it goes back to the human factor, right? Like you need the talent, or you need some partner or advisor or something to work with you to keep that thing going. Because I was selling into a very large company here in Australia. One of the people that worked there had a very important role in the finance team. It was, he controlled this massive spreadsheet.
Yep.
That literally, had all these formulas that probably he's the only one who knew how it worked. And he was there for like a decade. So he had all the knowledge of it. Now, if that guy got hit by a bus, this organization would have been completely screwed, right? So the risk is massive. In that case, they wanted to standardize on something that they know is proven. It's sort of SaaS. But, at some point, these people retire or these people change jobs. And so they need someone sort of like this managed service or somebody that's going to be there as the constant, all the way through. I think people have to kind of accept that there is a cost associated to that.
It really comes down to it's a ROI cost at the end of the day. You've got, all right, do we keep the process the same and build software that supports us? Or do we take this software on board that we're going to have a yearly license for and then we beholden to what they do and how we have to shift our processes to what that company thinks is the way a business like ours should operate. And then in operating, we've built software before for clients where we've built the initial process, it works end to end. And I've got one instance where we didn't touch the software for 9 years. They didn't update it, they didn't do anything. It just worked, and then they never had to change it because there was a core isolated workflow, and they never improved that internally inside the business. That was what they did. But then we've got other businesses where we're constantly making changes and adding new features. Because generally, as you start using things, you start seeing other things and you're getting more ideas on how we can improve things, and you start incrementally adding more value to the platform, which adds more value to your business. And then, all right, AI is available now. How long do you have to wait for that company to just add a chatbot into the product? Because that's the first thing they're going to do they've done in the last couple of years to add AI and enhance something, versus how do we actually add AI to provide value into what we're actually doing?
I think I look back over the years and I think, okay, first it was sort of, the SaaS movement and people were like, no, I'm on-prem, I want to control everything. And then they went to SaaS and then like mobile and they say, oh, well, I want my enterprise software to sort of be as easy as consumer software. So like, I want the mobile devices, and everybody was like, nope, no Apple and enterprise. And then everybody started using it anyway.
Yep.
So this whole kind of, I don't care what IT is saying, I'm taking my iPhone to work, right? Like, and then eventually that, becomes secure. And then then it becomes like, now we're on to AI and people are having to look at their business again and sort of say, okay, with fresh eyes, what does this mean for my customer's journey? What does this mean for my operational process? How do I take advantage of the new technology? But at the same time, there's a lot of sort of legacy baggage if you've been around for a long time where people are used to doing things and people don't like change. No. So like I go back to this thing of like, you've got to have champions. You've got to have people that are willing to make the change first before you can try to force people into a software and say, this is going to change your way of working. And that can work if you have the culture in that company that's very sort of founder strong, or maybe it's VC driven where they're like, you're either on the boat or you're off. Like you got to do what we say. And you're using this new technology because this is the optimized process. But if you are in a more, let's say, consensus culture, or you have people that are sort of, still kind of protecting their fiefdoms in a larger company, then it's a bit of a challenge to kind of corral all the cats, herd all the cats to say, okay, we're all agreeing we're going down this path, and we're willing to creatively disrupt our own business because we think we know there's a better way forward. It's going to help us in the long run. But I also find it interesting to say some companies are just going to start their own kind of skunk works in the corner that is hidden, and they're working on the secret project to kind of disrupt the core business. I think that's also another play as well.
It is, and that's the iPad, the iPhone, or the iPhone to the iPod at Apple. But what you're discussing there is what everyone's probably going through, saying we're going to be an AI first organization. The ones that actually understand what that means will know how to deliver that and change, fix the culture and add these products that are doing things. Then there's other ones that are just saying that and slapping in the chatbot, and now they're AI first.
Well, it's good marketing, right?
Yeah, and that's it. It's just perception. So it really does come down to understanding what your business does, how it operates, and knowing where the best place to fit either a new SaaS product or a platform and how to improve it. And then take into account the staff that you have and how they're operating. Because like you mentioned, that person that's running the spreadsheet and they're the only one that does it. They don't have to get hit by a bus for you to get a problem. They have the flu and you're all in all sorts for a week. It doesn't have to be a big thing.
It's true.
Yeah, they missed the train one day and now for the entire day, everyone's behind. Like it's as small as that.
I think it's really understanding the customer journey, because ultimately if you're in a business, you're serving customers, and if you can make their experience better and AI helps you do that, fantastic. I've been also talking to people about what does this mean in the long run? If everyone has AI and everyone sort of has this like, okay, I have my AI BDR reaching out to you, and then I have something automatically booking the meetings, and then I have my AI salesperson like dealing with you in the contract, and then eventually you get the service delivered automatically and the human's not really in this kind of process. If that's the kind of experience of most companies, let's say, looking ahead, and then let's throw the robots in there later, servicing you as well, then what becomes a differentiator? That it's going to be those kind of human-led experiences. I spent a lot of time, in Thailand, as I mentioned, and part of my time there, I was the head of learning and development for a hospitality company. And it's very different than my upbringing. Like when I was in the US, I was very left brain, analytical, profit motive, litigious, like avoidance, like, the American culture, right? I moved to Asia, I moved to Thailand. It's very different. Let's say it's more superstitious. There's more, the Buddhism. There's like a whole different mentality. And so I was working at this company that was very focused on wellness and looking at sort of that different side. So I was calling it, those are my right brain years, right? So I was getting more familiar with like that. Those are the things you should be thinking about that are completely different and not necessarily measurable by analytical, logical standards, right? And going through that experience, I think kind of woke me up a little bit. I don't know if maybe a loaded word, woke me up, but it raised some questions in my mind.
Yeah, some awareness.
Awareness, yes. How do you want to live your life? Do you want to live your life squeezing every dollar out of the transaction, or do you want to live your life adding value to other people and making the world a better place, right? So, you start to think about these things, and I think that going back to what I'm saying around, if everything is sort of technical and transactional and, very focused on the monetary, then people are going to be looking for something that's more human connection. So they might pay a premium for that. And the reason why I bring up that experience is because if you think about what wealth means, what real wealth means, you can go into a hotel that's gold plated, shiny, chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and have crap service or good service. But maybe you actually want to go to an experience like I was working at where you take your shoes off and you go eat an organic meal and you connect with like-minded people or people that are, open and they're, talking about how to be well and all of these other experiences. And I think people are going to start to look for this sort of get me away from the tech and give me these opportunities to build community with people. And it might be community around AI. It might be community around things that are, non-technical in nature. But I think there's this opportunity for companies to think, how do I become less of the same and more like something that is unique? And that's just something that's been on my mind recently.
Yeah, in my mind, it's just everyone's going to be either craft or artisanal. That's the differentiation from being the automation robot driven business.
Well, that's it, right? People want to know like what is unique about this experience, because if this world of abundance pops up and everybody has every need met because the technology allows for unlimited things to appear, I'm still waiting for the whole sort of Star Trek thing where you press a button and your meal appears automatically.
I think we're all waiting for those sort of advancements. Well, at the moment, we've just got something that can write our emails for us.
That's right. So I think we have a long way to go, but
it's interesting.
I'm excited for the tech.
I'm excited too. It's interesting to see how far it's come in such a short time, because it was autocomplete, but it's autocomplete with now a little bit more to it. Still, these agents are getting interesting to see how that all plays out and actually rolls out for people, not just doing basic things. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the whole industry plays out. Sean, well, in the future, we have to probably have a catch up and actually talk a bit more on sort of the MarTech and what you're doing there and how AI is going to affect that industry, you think. But for now, we probably have to wrap it there. If anyone wants to find out more about you and reach out, how can they do that?
I think just I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place. Or Instagram, it's Sean Campbell HQ or at Sean Campbell HQ. Or just check me out on LinkedIn.
All right, we'll add all of that to the show notes as well, so it's easier for everyone to find. Once again, thanks for joining me on the DevReady podcast, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Pleasure.
Thanks.